The air was heavy when Alex stepped out of his car after a long day at the office, and for a moment he thought the silence of the street might soothe his nerves, but then he noticed the stares of furtive whispers the way a neighbor quickly pulled a curtain back into place, as though caught spying. His footsteps slowed and his chest tightened as he walked up the path to his townhouse, and that was when he saw it taped to his door, a crisp envelope stamped with the bold letters HOA violation notice. He tore it free, the paper crackling in his hands, and scanned the words, and each line made his stomach twist tighter until he felt sick. Excessive noise disturbance, fine $500, immediate payment required. His mouth went dry. Noise disturbance. He had been at the office until midnight preparing a network migration, his time logged, and his body exhausted. And there had been no noise at his home, no music, no television, no laughter, not even his presence. Alex crumpled the paper in his palm heat, rising to his face. He heard the click of heels before he saw her, and the sound was sharp, cutting to the quiet like glass shattering. And then she appeared, Kerren, the HOA president, her hair stiff, with spray, her smile stretched wide but cold. She looked him up and down, her eyes glinting with superiority, as if the street itself bowed to her authority. Noise complaints are taken very seriously in this community, she said, her tone honey but sharp beneath. You were blasting music well past midnight, disturbing everyone. Alex blinked in disbelief, and words stumbled from his throat. That is impossible. I was not even here. I just got home. I work nights. Sometimes you must have the wrong unit. Kerren gave a little laugh, not one of humor, but of dismissal. I live across the street. I know exactly where it came from. Rules are rules, pay the fine, or there will be consequences. She stepped closer, lowering her voice, so only he could hear, and her perfume mixed with the bitterness in his throat. You might be new here, but you will learn this neighborhood runs smoothly. Because of order, my order. Alex stared at her, his pulse hammering. He reached into his bag, pulled out his work badge, and showed her the electronic log on his phone. It displayed his late clock-out time, but Kerren waved it off like a bothersome insect. Excuses, she said. The board does not have time for them. A couple across the street lingered on their porch, eyes flicking between them, curiosity mixed with judgment, and Alex felt a burning shame, though he knew he had done nothing wrong. Kerren smiled wider as though savoring his silence, then turned sharply on her heel, striding away, her heels snapping against the pavement each step, sounding like a gavel slamming. Alex remained frozen, gripping the notice and breathing hard. He wanted to chase after her, to shout, to demand fairness, but he already understood the truth. Logic would not move this woman. He unfolded the notice again, staring at the fine, the ink dark against the white, and he thought his rent, his bills, the endless grind of his job, and now this baseless punishment that threatened to bleed him dry. The sun was sinking low, casting long shadows across the neighborhood, and those shadows fell heavier now, as though the very houses pressed closer, watching, silently judging. His throat ached with the urge to defend himself, but there was no one to listen, no one to believe. He locked his door behind him, but even inside the air felt invaded. The walls seemed thinner, the silence no longer comforting, but accusing. He tried to tell himself it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, something he could reason away, but the image of Kerren's smirk would not leave him. He sat on the couch, the crumpled notice in his hand, his jaw tight, his mind restless, and he whispered into the emptiness, I will not let this stand. But even as the words left his lips, he felt the unease settle deeper. This was not just a fine, this was the beginning of something else, and though he did not yet know how deep it ran, he could feel the edge of a battle sharpening against him. The next morning Alex stepped outside to the sound of birds and the rustle of leaves, yet the calm only sharpened the weight pressing on his chest. For taped once again to his door was another envelope, another notice, another accusation. His fingers shook as he opened it, and his stomach churned when he read the words noise violation, repeat offense, fine $750, cumulative $1,250. The paper cut into his palm and his eyes blurred with disbelief. He had not even been home last night. He had stayed at the office long past midnight, finalizing scripts for a server migration, his absence documented, his alibi airtight. Yet here was another punishment written with the same cold authority. Neighbors walked past, their glances sharp, their whispers quick and cutting. He caught fragments of words, nuisance, troublemaker, always problems, and the shame hit harder than the fine. Kerren appeared again as if summoned by his dread, her stride brisk, her lips painted in a smug curve. She folded her arms and spoke with a voice carrying far enough for others to hear. Another violation, Alex, she said. You are disturbing the peace again. And again the community cannot tolerate such disregard. His jaw tightened and he forced out, "This is absurd. I was not even home last night. I can prove it." Kerren tilted her head to smile, not leaving her face. "You are free to appeal, of course, but I chair the board, and the board has already denied it." The finality in her words struck like a slammed door. He realized she had no intention of fairness, no willingness to listen, only control. At the evening HOA meeting, Alex stood before the gathered neighbors, the fluorescent lights harsh above the air thick with murmurs. He presented his side, clear, calm, factual, but Kerren rose and cut him off with a sharp wave. "He has been a disruption," she declared, her voice echoing. "3 complaints in 1 week, all verified, all consistent with his unit. This community deserves peace, and I will not allow one resident to destroy it." Gasps and nods rippled through the room, and Alex felt the walls closing, and though he raised his voice steady with anger. "You're lying. I was not there. I have proof, and you know it." Kerren smirked and leaned closer as if confiding a secret, yet her words were for all to hear. "This is not a courtroom, Alex. This is our home, and in our home we choose order, and you are out of order." The meeting ended with Kerren basking in the approval of fearful nods, while Alex sat silent, his pulse pounding and his hope fraying. Later he knocked on the door of a neighbor. He trusted Mrs. Reynolds, a kind woman, who once brought him cookies. When he moved in, she opened the door, hesitated, then spoke in a hushed tone. "We did hear loud music last night, but Kerren insisted it was from your unit. She told everyone you have a history of it." Alex felt the bitterness rise, because there was no history, only Kerren twisting perception, molding truth into whatever shape suited her. The fines piled higher, letters arriving like clockwork until the number threatened to cripple him, and each envelope carried with it not just a financial blow, but the sting of helplessness. At night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through every attempt at reason, every word dismissed, every piece of evidence ignored, until one thought began to crystallize. Kerren did not want resolution. She wanted domination, and she wanted him broken, humiliated, silenced. The realization struck with clarity, like ice water. His logical appeals were useless, his polite defenses meaningless. He would never be free of her shadow if he kept playing by her rules. He rose from bed, walked to the window, and looked across the street, where Kerren's porch light glowed defiantly in the dark, as if she owned the night itself, and his lips pressed into a thin line. "If logic will not work," he whispered to himself, "then I will need another way." The words hung in the room like a vow, and though his heart still hammered, he felt the shift deep inside from prey to hunter, from cornered to calculating. He turned away from the window, his mind already churning with the faint shape of something sharper, something Kerren would not expect. And for the first time since the nightmare began, a flicker of resolve burned against the suffocating weight of her control. Alex bought 2 small cameras, the kind that could blend into the corners of his living room windowsill, their tiny lenses nearly invisible. He installed them with steady hands, though inside his chest his heart raced. He checked the angles twice, then linked them to his phone, determined that no matter what Kerren claimed, he would have the truth preserved in sound and image. The first night passed quietly, no music, no disturbance, nothing but silence. Yet the next morning another notice arrived, taped neat and cruel. On his door, violation, repeat offense, cumulative fine, now $1,500, and each word seared into his mind like fire. He pulled up the footage from a night before, hours of still silence, the faint hum of his refrigerator, the creak of the pipes, no disturbance, no music, the evidence irrefutable, but evidence meant nothing to Kerren unless it served her power. Alex studied the neighborhood through his blinds, his eyes tracing the houses, the windows, the glow of televisions. He wondered who truly made the noise, who Kerren sought to shield, or perhaps she herself was the culprit. The answer came 2 nights later, his phone buzzing with a notification while he sat in his office, finishing lines of code. He swiped the screen, and the live feed filled his vision, not silence, but music, pulsing bass, shaking the walls, the sound spilling into night. And the source clear for the angle across the street, Kerren's house lights blazing, her porch crowded with guests laughing, shouting, glasses clinking. Alex sat frozen, the irony almost too sharp to swallow. Then his lips curled into the faintest smile as he recorded every second, capturing the evidence that exposed her scheme. The following day, Kerren paraded down the sidewalk, her heels clacking, her voice raised at anyone within earshot. She spoke of neighbors respecting peace, of cracking down on violators, her words like daggers aimed at Alex, though she never said his name. He let her talk, he let her glow in her arrogance, because now he had a plan forming crisp and clear. That night, he stayed at the office deliberately late, the cameras running, the neighborhood quiet, until near midnight, when the thump of bass began again, another of Kerren's gatherings, and soon after his phone lit with a message from the HOA, another violation. notice pre-drafted, and smug in his assumption. He laughed under his breath, not bitter this time, but sharp calculating, and he knew the moment had come. He called the police, his voice steady, as he explained a noise disturbance reported repeatedly from his address, but he wanted them to confirm with their own eyes that his unit was silent. Minutes later, the patrol car rolled into the street, its lights muted, but its presence commanding neighbors peeking from blinds as Kerren in her red dress greeted the officers with an air of authority. "It is him again," she said, her voice dripping with false certainty. "He has been disturbing us for weeks." The officers nodded politely, then walked to Alex's door, knocked, waited, listened, silence. No music, no disturbance. They exchanged a glance. One officer checked the log, no response from inside. They looked toward Kerren's house, where the music still throbbed, laughter spilling onto the lawn. The officer turned back and asked Kerren, "Are you certain the sound is from his unit? Because it seems to be coming from yours." For the first time, Kerren faltered, her smile twitching, her eyes darting the mask, slipping though only for a second. Alex watched from the shadows at the end of the street, his phone in hand, recording the scene, every detail, captured her denial, her unease, the sound of music blasting from her open windows. His chest tightened with satisfaction, though. He kept himself still patient. The trap had not yet sprung fully. The officers lingered, then walked toward her door, their posture firm, their voices raised above the music. Kerren followed, stammering words too soft to reach Alex. Ears her once proud stride, now hurried, now uneven. The neighborhood was awake, watching, heads leaning from porches, eyes wide with curiosity. The queen of order suddenly flustered under scrutiny. Alex slipped his phone back into his pocket and turned away. He did not need to reveal himself. Not yet. The moment of truth would come when the evidence was undeniable and the audience too large to ignore. He walked home under the glow of streetlights, the night air cool against his skin, his thoughts sharp. With resolve, Kerren thought herself untouchable, but the walls of her power were beginning to crack. And as he closed his door behind him, the silence of his home, no longer suffocating, but steady, he whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow the game changes." The following evening, the neighborhood gathered for another HOA meeting. The air tense, the chairs lined in stiff rows. Alex entered quietly, the weight of weeks pressing against his shoulders, yet his eyes carried a new steadiness. The camera footage stored safely on his phone, the police report folded in his pocket, evidence sharpened into a blade. Kerren stood at the front, her posture rigid, her voice sweet with venom. She recited violations with theatrical flair, waving letters, as though they were scripture, each accusation aimed squarely at Alex, her words weaving a story of chaos and disruption, painting him as a menace. Neighbors shifted in their seats, murmurs spreading, some nodding in reluctant agreement, others glancing nervously between Kerren and Alex. But Alex remained still, his hands folded, his expression calm. When Kerren finished, she looked at him, her lips curving into a smug smile. "Would you like to deny it again, Alex, or shall we proceed with sanctions?" He rose slowly, every eye following as he walked to the front. His steps measured, his breath steady, and when he spoke, his voice was clear, strong, resonant. "Yes, I would like to deny it, and this time I have proof." Kerren laughed, a sound brittle. "Proof?" She scoffed. "Your excuses have grown tiresome." Alex unlocked his phone, held it high, and pressed play. The room filled with the unmistakable thrum of bass laughter, shouting, the image of Kerren's brightly lit house alive with partygoers, a date, and time stamped clear on the screen. Gasps erupted across the room, heads turned, eyes widened. Kerren froze, her smile faltering, her face draining of color. Alex continued, his tone sharp with precision. "This footage was recorded the same night you filed a complaint against me, claiming I was blasting music from my unit. While I was at work, these cameras show the truth. The noise was never mine, it was yours." Kerren stammered. "That is fabricated, it must be." But her voice cracked thin with desperation. Alex pulled a folded report from his pocket, unfolding it slowly for all to see. "The police confirmed it themselves. They came to my unit and found silence, then traced the sound to your home. This is their written record." The room erupted, neighbors whispering loudly, eyes cutting toward Kerren, the authority she once wielded, splintering before their very eyes. One officer present at the meeting who had responded that night stood and confirmed Alex's words, his tone firm, his presence undeniable. Kerren swayed on her heels, her jaw working, her hands trembling. "You lied." A neighbor muttered, and another echoed. All this time she blamed him when it was her. Kerren turned to the crowd, her voice rising, frantic. "He is twisting this. He is manipulating all of you. I was protecting our peace." But the words fell hollow, her composure gone, her mask shattered. Alex stepped closer, his voice steady, but laced with steel. "You try to break me, you try to ruin me with lies, but lies always collapse under the weight of truth. Kerren opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came. Her eyes darted, her breath shallow, her kingdom crumbling in front of her. The HOA chair cleared his throat, awkward and pale. Given this evidence, all fines against Alex are rescinded immediately, and an investigation into misconduct will be opened against you, Kerren. Her gasp cut through the air like glass shattering. She staggered back, her hand clutching the table for balance. Neighbors shook their heads, some laughed bitterly, others whispered with relief, the tide turning fully against her. Alex turned to leave, but paused at the doorway, his voice carrying across the room, calm, decisive, final. Funny how the loudest person in the neighborhood ended up being the one who could not handle the truth. Laughter rippled to the crowd, low, but growing, and Kerren flinched as though each chuckle struck her pride. Outside, the night air felt lighter. The street, no longer heavy with suspicion. Alex walked slowly, his steps unhurried, his chest expanding with a long breath of freedom. By the next morning, clips from a meeting and the police encounter had already spread. Neighbors had filmed and shared them online, the title flashing across screens, HOA Kerren caught lying backfires instantly. Alex saw the video on his phone, thousands of views, climbing higher, comments cheering justice, mocking her arrogance, memes already forming. And he smiled, not out of spite, but with the quiet satisfaction of a man who endured injustice and turned it on its head. As he stood on his porch sipping his coffee, he saw neighbors waving friendly, now respectful, one calling out, "Glad you stood up to her," another adding, "About time someone did." Across the street, Kerren's blinds were drawn tight, her car, absent her power, dissolved into whispers and laughter. Alex looked at the morning sun rising warm across the rooftops, and for the first time since the ordeal began, the neighborhood felt like home, not a battlefield, not her kingdom, but his peace reclaimed. And with a final breath, he whispered to himself, "It is over.